this is Tabia, and today I'm going to explain the most confusing knitting terms to you. If you are a beginner or if you just haven't social knitted so much, you might have realized that knitters might use those strange words that are not quite logical, and I thought I would explain the most confusing ones to you today. First term is frogging, which is the same as ripping out your knitting. That means you pull out your needle and rip it all out. The reason why it's called frogging is because of the sound that frogs make, like rip it. And I'm not an English speaker, so I had to look this one up. But you get it, like frogs are telling you to rip it, and that would sound like the sound that the frogs make. And I also have a tutorial on how you do it, so if you messed up and have to undo it, you can check out that video. That will be linked somewhere. Second word is TINK, which is just the word knit backwards. So K-N-I-T is knit and TINK is T-I-N-K. You get it. The difference to frogging and tinking is that when you tink, you don't rip out the needle, but you just knit backwards one stitch at a time. And how you would do that is that you insert your left needle into the stitch below the one that is on your right needle, and then you can slip off the stitch from your right needle, and so you just go back stitch by stitch, which would be better if you don't have to get back so far, just a row or a few stitches, so then it wouldn't be worth to rip out the whole needle and frog the whole thing. The third term is blocking, which could, for example, appear in a knitting pattern. In the very end of it, it would say block pieces to measurements and then sew them together or whatever. Blocking means that you soak your knitting in water when you're all finished, and then you lay it to dry. So there are several opinions on how to do it in the best way, and I also made a video on my process on how I like to do it in case you want to check that out. But the reason that you do this is that the fibers of your yarn would like really put themselves into place when you wet the wool. And for example, in stranded knitting, your fabric can be much smoother and nicer after you blocked it. Fourth term, and these are actually two that I put together, is a gauge swatch. Gauge refers to how many stitches and rows your fabric has on a piece that is 10 centimeters to 10 centimeters. For example, it would say gauge 24 stitches to 32 rows or something. And if you are making a garment, for example, if you want it to fit the right way, then it's really important that you match the gauge of the pattern, because otherwise, if you have the same number of stitches, the thing that you would knit would become tighter or larger. And in order to see if you are getting gauge, which knitters could say, you are knitting a gauge swatch. And a swatch is basically a tiny piece of fabric where you try out the needles, and if you are having the right tension and are getting the right amount of stitches and rows to match the pattern's gauge. Also, you should block your swatch the same way as you will block your garment, because the yarn could change and become wider or looser or denser or whatever after washing it. So treating your swatch the same way as you will treat your garment will help you make something that fit and that has the size that you want it to be. And the last term that you might want to know about is pooling, which is something that could occur when you are working with hand-dyed or variegated or self-striping yarn. And pooling refers to how the pieces of the different color in the yarn are putting themselves together and would create a pattern of some sort. So for example, if you are working with a self-striped yarn, the only thing that the dyer has done to the yarn is that you have pieces of the yarn that are in a certain color for a certain length. So if you would knit a sock, of course the stripe would become thicker than if you would knit a scarf or a cowl or something with a much larger circumference. And because of that, the colors can put themselves together in different ways, and it depends on how many stitches, and if you're knitting in the row or front or back, or how these colors would come out. And I myself am not really good at this actually, but there is a craftsy class that I found that Jill Draper has, where she explains how you intentionally can use these different colors in one strand of yarn to create patterns. So these were all of the terms that I wanted to talk about today. If you have any other terms that you thought were confusing in the beginning or that you would like me to explain, leave me a comment down below. If you, like me, never want to stop thinking and talking about knitting, then you can subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. On Instagram I can be found as Tabusen, and thank you for watching so much, and I will see you next week. Thank you, bye bye!